In 1974, King's Landing opened to the general public. In more recent years, that name is more widely associated with something else. But we're not talking about that today. This is completely unrelated, and this King's Landing was first. This King's Landing is a village on the bank of the St. John River, made up of buildings from the 19th and early 20th centuries. It's populated by actors, all dressed for the time period and very knowledgeable about the buildings, artifacts, and demonstrations that they perform. There are over 70 buildings that have been restored and maintained across 300 acres of land. Each of the buildings are set in a particular year between 1820 and 1925. There are houses and churches and barns, a mill, a school, and an inn. The area is packed with buildings that you can see and walk through and explore. I found this commercial for King's Landing from 1998.
King's Landing Historical Settlement, just 20 minutes west of Fredericton, New Brunswick, where history comes alive. Call today for your free brochure and calendar of events.
They operate from June to October every year, and they advertise a whole calendar of events throughout the year. Last year was the 50th anniversary celebration, which I did not go to. They also have special programs for school groups and special Christmas dinners at the inn and some of the homes around the village. This one kind of astonishes me, and if I had the money, I would totally be doing this. But for the Christmas dinner at the houses, they start at $540 and go all the way up to $1,080. Now, that is for the whole dinner at a maximum of 6 guests, so it's about $100 per person. And if you're splitting that cost between adults, that could be reasonable. The price is all inclusive, so that includes the meal with taxes, and you get a wagon ride to and from the house. This price also includes costumes. You're meant to go there a week before your dinner for a costume fitting so that you can dress up for the night. This all sounds like a lot of fun, and I would love to eventually do this, but alas, it's out of reach for now. So, aside from the special events, what goes on there? Well, that commercial showed a lot of interesting things, like demonstrations of weaving and laundry and blacksmithing, as well as music shows, theater shows, and puppet shows for all the guests to enjoy. But I really had no idea what to expect. I did find this CBC article from 2018 that interviewed a former curator of King's Landing, Daryl Butler, who, according to the article, was a member of staff from the very beginning in 1974 all the way up to 2015. In this interview, he was complaining that many of the reenactment elements, meaning the chores that the actors would be doing, like the weaving and laundry and cooking, were phased out and the village was becoming a static showcase. A restored house to a specific period of time tells a much broader story or history, and it brings it a lot more to life, and it tells it in a way that's very visitor-friendly, Butler said. The visitor can learn with the senses, smelling, tasting, hearing, and talking, he said. Former curator can't find King's Landing vision in lifeless exhibits. Alyssa Gould for CBC. Something from this article that I loved was the mention of a potential bouncy pad that would be added to the village, and Daryl's incredulity at that. When we envision King's Landing, it would be literally a historical bubble or atmosphere in which nothing modern would be encountered as you came through the settlement, Butler said. I was excited about the potential rift between the staff, and I imagined that there were different factions with different ideas about how the park should be run and whether or not that should include bouncy castles. And now I really didn't know what to expect. Would there be puppet shows? Would I get to watch someone spin thread? Would there be a bouncy castle? Who knows? Not me at this point. On Christmas Day, 2017, my grandmother died. And this is where my short story with King's Landing starts. My dad drove up to Fredericton to clear out her apartment and has been storing all of her things ever since, except for a couple of flats of Coca-Cola that she had stocked up that I gave to one of my coworkers at the time in a sort of parking lot drug deal where we pulled our cars up alongside each other and unloaded the stash from my trunk and put it into hers. Early last year, meaning 2024, I was helping my dad finally go through some of her things, choosing what to keep, what to donate, and what to disperse among the rest of the family. I got to keep this giant picture of myself as a baby, and I also got to inflict the matching one onto my brother. In the pile of pictures and frames and in albums and just left in the envelope they used to get from the printers, I found a few letters. One was from her sister-in-law, Shirley, who was married to my uncle Cecil, dated sometime in the late 1990s. She talked of a few things, but she mentioned that Cecil was, again, working at King's Landing that summer, and how much he enjoyed driving the horse and buggy around the village, that he loved meeting so many people and getting to talk to them. At the time, I hadn't heard of King's Landing. I asked my dad about it, and after explaining that he remembers threatening to take us there when we misbehaved, an anecdote I have no memory of, he said it would probably be something I would actually be interested in. This started my fall down the rabbit hole. I was already planning a trip to Fredericton for the Canada Day weekend for a completely unrelated event, so I very quickly added an afternoon at King's Landing to my itinerary. I decided that my afternoon at King's Landing would take place on the Thursday before Canada Day, which was the day that I drove the 5 hours to Fredericton. By the time I got there, after stopping at the Great Canadian Bagel for lunch, the weather was beautiful. It was a wonderfully sweltering day to walk around a Victorian-era village. One of my regrets is that I had not brought a water bottle, because I found out after I got there that they have several wells around the village that pump fresh spring water for you to drink, but only if you brought a receptacle. So that's my first tip. If you decide to go, bring a water bottle. After paying the entry fee, $28 per adult, I exited the Welcome Center and was transported back in time to the Victorian era. I got there at 3 p.m. and they closed at 5, so I had 2 hours to explore the park. Now, I was very excited to receive a map upon payment of my entrance fee, but I was also immediately dazed and confused.
Guess I'll go this way.
And the map just blurred before my eyes. I attempted to refer to it several times while I was aimlessly wandering, but it was useless each time, which is 100% on me and my own overwhelming excitement. The first building I came across was Lower Pockiok Superior School.
Lower Pockiok. Oh, the school.
This is a bit of an underwhelming start because you can only stand at the entrance. There's a plexiglass baby gate across the back of the classroom. It was still interesting to look, and it was thoughtfully furnished, but a disappointing start.
What are they learning?
But while I'm in the school, I hear horses.
I hear horses. Oh my goodness. There they are.
I run out the door just in time to see the horse-drawn wagon going by on the road. You can hear it in my voice how excited I was. I was too far away to get on, and I'm not running in the heat, but the driver did pick up this family that was just coming in, and they all rode off while I stared on, full of jealousy. But I forged on. The next building I came to was closed, and apparently doesn't open until later in the season. Which I guess is fair. I came at the very beginning of the season on a weekday and they didn't have their full program out yet. So at this point, I decided to turn back to the signpost near the start.
Okay. Well, the horses went this way, so there must be something interesting this way. There they go.
I went down the only other path I could. The other path didn't have any signs pointing down it, so I assumed there was nothing that way, and looking at the map now with my clear head, it just leads to the same place. So I turned down the path to follow the horses. Consulting the map, the next house I went into was the Hagerman house. And it was here that I encountered my first actor.
Oh, it's warm in here.
That's what I said.
How are you standing it?
Oh, I'm fine right now.
Okay.
She was sitting at the kitchen table making something. It looks like she was shredding chicken with her hands, but I'm not sure. As I said, it was really hot that day and really hot in that room. The oven was, well, not on, but hot. The coals were burning, making it unbearably hot in that room. Now, that might have sounded like a complaint, but it was not. The stove being hot shows that they aren't really just actors. They are actually working in these houses, and they're not playing pretend.
Oh dear. Well, here's a put him on the survey.
That is commitment to realism and added value to the experience. I am delighted about that stifling atmosphere in the kitchen, even if it did make me want to leave as soon as possible. I want to mention here that I tried not to film the actors too much They were working, they were at their job, and although I'm sure they're used to being filmed and having their picture taken, it still felt like it would be rude to shove a camera in their face when we're having a conversation. So I didn't really film while the actors were talking directly to me. I have some shots of them from afar and quite a few of the beginnings of conversations, but you'll notice some holes in the footage later when I had longer interactions, which I will have to simply narrate to you to the best of my ability. I ran into my second actor in the next room, who was standing quite menacingly in a doorway. Again, not a complaint. That's character, that's added value.
Welcome to the Hageman House. This is
Okay.
number 9 on your map.
I was a little confused. Didn't know where I was.
He tried to, very helpfully, point out where I was on the map and perhaps give me some direction as to how I should explore the village, but alas, I was still blinded by excitement at this point and could not properly read the map or really take in his guidance, so I continued to wander. This house, as opposed to the school that I first saw, is fully explorable. You'll have noticed the same plexiglass baby gate in front of the pantry that was actually open when I went by. Now, I can understand why it's there and why it's normally closed. They do actually cook in this kitchen and therefore do actually store food there, and you don't want random people poking around in the foodstuffs. Further, it was open when I went by because she was actively cooking in that moment. The rest of the house was a house. There were some cool antiques to look at, and some rooms were better furnished than others.
That's nice. Take that off.
And there was a fire extinguisher, which is a little anachronistic.
Anachronistic fire safety.
But, of course, understandable. Next to this house is a very large barn called the Scott Barn.
Hey. Yeah. A lot of stuff in here.
Inside, it was full of carriages, and I saw a rope across the first few, so I assumed they would all be blocked off and you wouldn't be able to walk through most of the barn. Now, that would be reasonable, as these are all antiques, but I could walk through almost the whole length of the barn, right between the carriages.
Oh my god. Look at all these.
And it felt wrong to be able to do that, but there was an actor at the other end of the barn, and he could have told me off at any time, so you really can just walk between them. Speaking of that actor, he was apparently the carpenter, and he showed me some of the things he had made and talked about his plans to make a new workbench. I wish I had had more questions to ask him, but woodworking is not something I know anything about, so it was a very quick exchange, and then I moved on. As I left the barn, I saw some more horses, and my excitement spiked once again.
Oh my god. Horsies. Hey, horsies. Oh, you're so pretty.
These ones were not working, they were just hanging out, so I went to say hi. On the map, you can see this large complex to the left. This is the Jocelyn farm. I gathered that this used to be a working farm, but when I went there, there wasn't really anyone around, and it was empty.
Hi, horsies.
But it was a large section of the map, and I was still excited to check it out. But this is where my wandering got completely redirected, and I didn't actually get an opportunity to explore it.
Okay, go this way. Spiders. Oh, hello.
Good day.
Did you?
I ran into another actor when I entered the house, and she was much more forceful in directing me than the other actor who tried to get me to look at the map.
Welcome to the Jocelyn farm.
Okay.
Are you just starting?
I'm wandering.
Did you just come in?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What time is it?
3.
3. All right. You have a lot to see.
Okay.
Did you see the Hagerman, the White House, as you came
Yes.
in? You saw that?
Yes, I saw that.
If you were listening earlier when I said there was over 70 buildings in this park, and then saw the map I showed and were confused as to where the rest was, well, you're quicker on the uptake than I was. I've tricked you a bit here. I wanted you to experience this the way that I did while I'm telling you this. I've edited this map. This is the real map, with the arrow pointing to this little bridge up in the top and directing you to turn it over when you get there. I didn't see this. I thought I had been looking at the whole map. This actor basically kicked me out of the Jocelyn farm. She was very polite about it, but basically she was saying that I didn't have a lot of time and that the good shit was over the bridge that I had neglected to notice on the map.
So she basically kicked me out because they're closing in 2 hours, and apparently this is not the interesting bit. So she told me to follow the path and go over the bridge so I actually have time to see the good stuff. So I'm headed over there now.
Turning over the map and finally seeing it for the first time, I had a new course to follow.
Stonehouse is up there. It looks really nice, but she said don't even stop there. She said keep going, follow the path. That's where the good shit is. Oh, so pretty. We're not stopping.
From the bridge, you can see the sawmill and the grist mill, which look gorgeous from that vantage point, but I wasn't stopping yet.
Well, it looks inviting. And it says village. So, King's Head Inn. Let's go this way.
When I finally emerged from the path and entered the village proper, I was dazzled. It's huge. The first building that you see is the King's Head Inn. You can actually eat here. There wasn't anyone inside besides the bartender when I went, so I just took a quick look around. It's very atmospheric and would be a great place to eat, but I was on a time limit. They do themed dinners here a few times a year, at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, and I assume the price is a lot lower than the specialty dinners in the houses. It's not listed on their website as of me writing this, though. I went to the Lint Farm next. It's very small compared to some of the other buildings, 2 rooms on the lower floor and 1 room upstairs. Inside, there was another actor. She gave me a whole spiel about the house. The year is 1830 at the Lint Farm. The first room on the main floor is the workroom. It has the stove and the hearth. The other room would be used for guests. They had a couple of pews in it, and the actor told me that they would use that room as a church for the people of some Christian denomination, I can't remember which one she said, who didn't have their own dedicated church in the village. There is an Anglican church and a Presbyterian church in the village, so a different one from those. She also mentioned that the upstairs was the bedroom, but they would only use it in the summer and would sleep downstairs in the winter to be close to the fire. She invited me to go up the stairs and check out the upper floor. These stairs were scary. They were very narrow and steep, definitely not up to code. I was afraid I was going to fall at every step, but these were not the scariest steps that I would encounter that day.
A little trundle, and a bed for the baby, a bat for the bed bugs.
The upstairs was sparse and not very notable, but I still had to go back down those stairs. I stopped recording so that I could hold on with both hands. I popped into the Anglican church.
It's quite small. Oh my god, it's hot.
Nothing really special, but I did run into another plexiglass baby gate blocking off the... What's the front of a church called? Okay, so the baby gate was blocking off the sanctuary, which, like the pantry, makes sense. Okay, so the next house I went into was the Purley farm.
Got a yellow house. I don't know which one that is. It's one of these. Oh, here's it.
Beautiful, gorgeous, stunning. I walk in and I can hear some noises coming from the back of the house, but I took a quick look at the drawing room and the dining room before going into the kitchen.
I think someone's washing clothes. Little parlor room, dining room.
There, I met Mrs. Purley.
Oh,
Well, good day. How are you?
Good.
Making such a noise with my mouth. I didn't hear you come in.
it's all right.
The noises I heard were her at the water pump, and she told me that she just made some biscuits.
It was a busy day. I did make some biscuits today.
Good.
Bacon
Awesome.
and cheddar.
She was very excited to tell me about her stove. It sounded like it was quite the ordeal to get it there.
I have a beautiful wood cook stove. It's called the New Brunswicker.
Oh,
And it's made in St. John.
okay.
And it came up on the Bonnie Doon.
Mhm.
That goes between Fredericton and St. John all the time. And from there, Mr. Purley hired somebody with a wagon to bring it here.
Yeah.
But have you been to see Mrs. Hagerman today?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, she does like to say that she has a good stove, but
This
it's a
one.
superior stove. But I have 2 ovens. I have a warming oven here, and I have my baking oven.
Well, that's fancy. I don't have 2 ovens.
down
I've only
here.
got one.
So,
I probably didn't pay $35 like I did for mine.
$35. Can you imagine? Damn inflation. That was Mr. Purley, and these 2 actors were, I don't want to say the best, because everyone did a great job, but the most attentive. I was the only guest in the house, and they proceeded to take me on a whole tour. It started with Mrs. Purley taking me to the dining room and raving about the furnishings. She mentioned the wallpaper in particular, which was designed by William Morris, who was famous for designing wallpapers in the Victorian era. She talked a lot about Queen Victoria and how they stay fashionable by copying her. Then Mr. Purley took me into the drawing room to show me his birds, these stuffed birds in the corner. When he went back out into the hallway, he invited me to explore the rest of the house and talked about the staircase. Yes, even the staircase has a story. It wasn't originally in this house, but part of his father's house, and then refitted to this one. They had to shorten the banisters to make it fit. He told me that they actually had a bidet in the house, but that it was hidden and challenged me to find it. He told me what room it was in and sent me upstairs. I wasn't walking around for very long, and before I got to the room he had indicated, Mr. Purley had joined me again. He met me in one of the back rooms that had another really scary set of stairs in it. He led me to the front of the house to just show me where the bidet was. I could tell he was actually really excited about the hidden toilet. In this room, there were a couple of pieces of disguised furniture. The bidet was a chamber pot inside of a stool that would fold open. The whole house was gorgeous and wonderfully furnished, and my impromptu tour guides were amazing. I could tell they were really excited about what they were talking about, and it made the house the most memorable one. As I came out of the Purley farm, I heard some sheep and got excited again.
Oh, where'd the sheep go? I think they're in here.
I saw them from a distance in a fenced-off field. When I got closer, they had all retreated to the barn. The barn door was open, so I wandered inside.
Oh, I hear them. Hello. Hi, sheep.
Turns out there were goats as well. I could get pretty close to them, but chose to keep my distance, as sheep are all well and good, but goats can be mean.
Sheep and goats. I'm gonna stay back here. Okay, you guys stay over there.
And unfamiliar goats, especially, so I admired them from afar. It turns out that it was feeding time, and I got to watch them being corralled into the stalls.
We're getting dinner.
I wandered over to the Ingram house next. It's this big one up in the corner with this beautiful garden at the back. I didn't know if there was anyone in there at first, but I ran into some actors in the kitchen.
So many houses. Hi.
How are you
Oh.
today? We're just putting we'll put the small ends together. And watch yourself.
Yes.
It could get dangerous.
I'm not exactly sure what they were doing. It might have been like a drying rack for herbs. I only say that because they were hanging it in front of the fire and the garden out back, but I didn't ask. I thoroughly explored this house, as I did every other house, and moved on as the time was ticking by.
It's a big, beautiful bedroom like that. Again, with the wallpaper.
I exited at the back into the garden because I saw a trellis covered in vines on my way in, and I could not resist the urge to walk through it.
So pretty.
Next, I saw some cows.
My God, hi cows. I don't want to get too close, but you look so awesome. Look at you.
You can hear in my voice that I'm very excited, but you may have also noticed a pattern of me excitedly running up to the animals and then immediately becoming afraid and keeping my distance. As I passed another church that was locked up, I saw a long trail leading off into the trees. It didn't look very remarkable, but I pulled out the map and there was a house labeled at the end of the path.
Oh, I didn't know there was actually anything down there, but there is. I just passed the church, so I'm going there. I gotta get back 40 minutes to explore before the last wagon ride.
This was Colleen Cabin. I walk in and there's an actor in there and she's spinning flax. It's not a puppet show, but it's living history and I'll take it.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Walked all the way back here alone in the woods.
Yeah.
She seemed surprised that I had walked all the way back to this house. I would guess with the slow day and how out of the way this house was, she probably hadn't seen many people that day.
I've arrived at the Irish home of Mary and Timothy Colleen. I'm Bridget Burke. I'm just here helping out today.
So you're minding the house.
I'm minding the house and the chickens, so that
The chicken.
The chickens. Sadly, I did not see the chickens. It was a one-room house, and so after getting some information from the actor about it, I was off again. This time, I had a mission. You might look at this map and notice that there is this big section to the left that I have yet to go to. Some of you might have been waiting for when I would get to the theater, because I had mentioned theater shows and puppet shows way back at the start. And some of you might not have noticed at all that I skipped right past a whole section of the village. Like I did on the day, so my mission was to go to the grist mill.
When I went across the bridge last time, I saw the grist mill off in the distance. So that is my goal. Back by the inn and then over the bridge.
What was grist, and why are we milling it? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. So I approach the grist mill and I can see an actor hanging out inside.
Hi.
He greets me, makes a remark about the weather, and launches right into it.
So I'm the miller here in the grist mill.
Yeah.
And I'm just waiting for a farmer to come along with some buckwheat. This is buckwheat right here.
Okay.
And harvest it in the first, second frost in the fall.
He pulls out the grist, which is a grain of some kind, I'm still not sure, to show it to me and explains that it's used to make flour and that grist pancakes are very popular around here. I'm sure it's also used for other things that you use flour in. He takes me through the whole process, how it's all ground and then sifted into different grains, the finest grain being used for flour and the largest stuff being used for animal feed. He had his stuff down pat.
And this grist mill is powered by electrical turbine down in the basement. There's steel louvers on it that can open and close the lever up top and control the speed. And because I have a turbine, also I dig deep down the dam and I have running water. That means I can work all winter long. It doesn't freeze. There's two of them at the mill. I'll bag it and set it aside, or let it go in a 1,000-pound hopper, and I'll open that hopper up when I'm ready to mill. Then drop down to the second floor to what's called a smutter, and that's where it gets clean. That's just a round box with a fan in it that twirls the buckwheat around, blows the dirt and mold outside. And that mold has to come off. Well, actually, there's a shaker up there beside the round box with the fan in it that takes out the shaft and bigger stuff. So just the buckwheat's going into the fan-driven, the belt-driven fan in the round box.
After an extensively educational experience, I continued to wander back to where I had started from and towards my final stop, the Jones house.
The stone house that I passed on the way out. It's lovely.
This was the house that I was advised not to stop at way back at the start. This is where I also had my last actor encounter of the day. She was in the kitchen of the Jones house and told me about cooking in it. It had a huge open cooking hearth and a little bread oven on the side. She pointed out her Dutch oven and explained how it worked. The coolest feature was the well in the kitchen. She told me that I could help myself to fresh spring water, but again, I didn't bring a water bottle. So she invited me to explore the rest of the house and said that I could go all the way to the attic.
This one's so cool. Oh, we got a letter. Ooh, this is a fancy bed. What are they playing? This house is gorgeous. I love the furniture and all of the little touches everywhere. The letter that someone was writing, the sheet music on the piano, and the Bible with a handwritten inscription. And all of it is genuine antiques that you can interact with. The four-poster canopy beds were my favorite. Now I had to go to the attic. The actor said that I could, and so I had to. But this is where I encountered the scariest stairs of the day. Said I could go up to the attic. Now that looks terrifying. That looks more terrifying. They were so steep and so shallow, and not only did they go up to the attic, they also went down into the dark to the kitchen. I wasn't doing that, but the attic didn't look too spooky. Let's go. Oh my goodness. Oh. It was sparsely furnished. It was probably servants' quarters, but it did make me think of A Little Princess. The main draw for the attic, I think, besides the challenge of the stairs, is the huge loom off to the side. Oh, it's definitely hot up here. We got a loom. I love a loom. Loom room. Definitely gotta put the phone down to go back down these stairs. Those are scary. As much fun as I was having, I was about to be a little disappointed. It was getting close to closing time, and I was hoping to catch the last wagon back to the Welcome Center. But as I rounded the corner, I saw that it was actually far in front of me, and I had missed it. It was hot, and there was no way I was running after it, so I just had to watch it roll along ahead of me as we both went back to the start. I'm back at the start. Here's the cow. Now, I said that the Jones house was my last stop, but of course I couldn't leave before going through the gift shop, and I went straight for the t-shirts. A t-shirt is all I wanted. They had a lot of different knickknacks and candies, but I only had eyes for t-shirts, and I was not disappointed there. They had so many t-shirts, several styles, several sizes. I was not left wanting for t-shirt selection. With a t-shirt. My millstones. I have a lot of praise for King's Landing. The amount of pre-20th century buildings that are preserved here is overwhelming. Clearly, because I knew beforehand how many buildings there were and had a map in my hand and still missed a whole section at first and didn't feel like I had actually missed anything. I'm giving some concessions for the fact that my trip occurred very early into their season and on a very slow weekday, so I suspect that if I had gone at peak season on a Saturday or on a day when they had a scheduled event, there probably would have been more things to do. There probably would have been even more actors, but there probably would have also been more people there, considering their attendance numbers, and I wouldn't have gotten such great interactions with the staff. I definitely wouldn't have gotten that whole tour of the Purley farm. But if I had gone on a more optimal day, I may have actually seen a puppet show. In the end, I'm not upset with the lack of activities or shows. I'm mostly into the history, and I got plenty of that. There are just so many buildings to explore, and quite the variety as well. There's everything from a little one-room cottage to a large Victorian house fashionably furnished for the time. Further, the furnishings in all the buildings, from what I saw, was well thought out. As far as I'm aware, everything inside the buildings are authentic antiques, and they didn't look like they had just been tossed into the houses. From what I could see, the items in the rooms were in there because they looked like they belonged there. There was purpose and foresight in the decoration, and the fact that each building is thoughtfully set in different years is particularly interesting to me. Some of the actors even introduced the houses with the year that it was set, which for me helped to set the tone and ground the information that they had to give me. Speaking of the actors, a little thing that I noticed was that even though I said
hello to everyone, none of the actors said hello. They all said good day, because hello isn't something that was said before the invention and popularization of the telephone. I'm sure most people wouldn't notice something like that. If all the actors, or even some of them, said hello instead, I know I wouldn't have. And it's just such a nice little detail. Further, while Mr. Purley was showing me around the farm, whenever I mentioned something anachronistic, like when I compared his bidet to mine, he would say something like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," and very artfully move the conversation onto something else. It was a slow day, and for the most part, I was the only one around at every given moment, but every actor still made sure I had a full experience. I'm really glad I went out of my way a little bit to go to King's Landing. I had a lot of fun, even walking around by myself, and I would love to go back. Maybe on a day when there's a scheduled event happening, or if I can manage it, one of those catered Christmas dinners. Well, I guess that's it. Those were all of my thoughts on King's Landing. So don't look at the time code and see there's still like 20 minutes left. I promise everything's fine. Thanks for watching. In 1968, the Mactaquac Dam finished construction and began generating electricity, which today represents 20% of New Brunswick's power demand, flooding the St. John River Valley and consuming several communities that were once on its banks. Thousands of people were displaced and their homes razed or moved to make room for the new dam's head pond. Communities like Bear Island, which, though still the name of a community nearby, no longer has any islands, as they were both swallowed up. This flooding would have also destroyed several older houses, some over 100 years old at the time. After the success of a similar project in the St. Lawrence River Valley, which resulted in the creation of Upper Canada Village, the government of New Brunswick began the project to move these buildings out of the path of the flooding and create King's Landing. King's Landing was never a real village. It was never settled and never lived in. The individual houses were lived in at different points, but the village as a whole is an artificial construction made out of the ghosts created by a hydroelectric megaproject. King's Landing wasn't the only settlement created by this project. The government of New Brunswick also developed a new town to help house all of the people that were going to be displaced. This was the town of Nackawic. Now, that name might not mean anything to most of you, but it does mean something to me. This was a town that my grandmother lived in, my father grew up in, and that I visited many times during my life. It's been strange reading about its development over the course of my research. This place that seemed eternal when I was a kid is so fleeting now that I've seen pictures of the farmland that was there just 60 years ago. I read about how they placed all of the streets and moved and built houses onto the new lots. I read about the construction of the park I played in, the senior center my grandmother lived in, and the pulp mill whose awful smell I complained about. The Nackawic Bend, 200 Years of History, a very specific history book that I now own, is a compilation of the history of the area from the founding of New Brunswick all the way up to the present day of 1984. It uses some archaic language to describe the inhabitants of the area before that point, and that description lasts for only 2 paragraphs before never mentioning them again. That's not quite true. It is mentioned later in the book that the name Nackawic comes from the Maliseet or Wolastoqiyik word Nelgwawikek, which they say translates to straight and not in the direction it seems to be for how the river moves in that area. That claim seems to come from the Macmillan Book of Canadian Place Names, but that book only says it means straight stream, and for the life of me, I can't parse the bibliography to find where they get that claim from, and I'm not sure if it would even help, as at the beginning of the bibliography, there's this little disclaimer that basically says, I didn't even try to keep a complete bibliography for this, fuck you. It felt personal. The relevant part of this book, for my purpose, comes at the end, where it has some personal stories from the people who lived in the area during the flooding and who were forced to move to the new town. They talk about the entire process, from hearing about the project to picking up and moving their lives to the rising waters. They also mention some of the casualties that resulted from it. Excerpts from Lena Monroe's diary, 1966. August 30th. A laborer was killed, crushed, at east end of Nackawic Bridge. September 23rd. Alton Stairs was killed at our driveway in evening. Lack of signs or barriers. He drove a Volkswagen into a deep, deep hole. The car caught, but he fell out. September. Elementary school was started. The Nackawic Bend, 200 Years of History, page 248. These diary entries go back and forth between the toll taken in the process and the construction that marks progress on the project. Something I find particularly provocative is when Lena's diary entries start describing the rising waters of the new head pond. Excerpts from Lena Monroe's diary, 1967. November 6th. Nackawic flooding started today. November 11th. Our interval land is covered. November 16th. There is a foot of water over the Culleton Bridge. November 18th. The barony is half covered. December 1st. River frozen over. The Nackawic Bend, 200 Years of History, page 253. It was out of this flood, and the convenient timing of New Brunswick's 200th birthday, that the idea for King's Landing was born. Progress begets destruction, which begets innovation. Some buildings were chosen to be saved and moved to a new plot of land to create a historical reenactment village, creating basically what we see today, minus a few buildings that were added later, moved from other parts of New Brunswick. The Town That Drowned by Riel Nason is a fictionalized retelling of these events. It was actually a really good book, and I say actually because it received the Commonwealth Book Prize in 2012 and other Canada-specific awards, and these awards committees are notoriously biased. They ignore all genre fiction, and the only things that ever win are small town, slice of life, coming of age stories. Now, this book is a small town, slice of life, coming of age story, but it's a really good one. And I think the most illustrative quote from this book is this: "If you ever wake up one day and the people who run your little province tell you they're going to drown the valley you lived in, if those men decide for you that a tidal wave is coming to wash your whole life away, let me say now, if this happens, there will be casualties." The Town That Drowned, Riel Nason, page 197. It reflects the real loss of life that occurred during this ordeal. And I got really excited when the book mentioned King's Landing, because obviously that was the reason I was reading this book in the first place. But at least there is one thing that makes it seem like the celebrations and the flood do have pretty good timing. There's a new historical village being assembled as the province's centennial project. The Town That Drowned, Riel Nason, page 214. All of my research into the history of King's Landing that spiraled into the construction of the Nackawic Dam got me thinking about, well, history, and specifically how we choose to remember it. The beginning of that very specific history book that I now own begins by justifying its existence. It mentions the upcoming centennial and how so many people came together to create it, and finally, it says this: "The memories of our elders should be known, respected, handed down, and written down. The people here should know, feel, and become part of the heritage." The Nackawic Bend, 200 Years of History, page 3. Which is very reminiscent of what Daryl Butler said was the original vision for King's Landing, but it feels incomplete. I didn't actually learn about the history of King's Landing when I visited King's Landing. The actors are all in character, and so when I asked, where was this house originally, that question was brushed off and quickly moved on from. The history being taught at King's Landing is interesting, and the artifacts are real, but the story being told is manufactured. I had to do my own research to find out the real history, the very interesting real history, but it's still incomplete, and it just nags at me. Like the Nackawic Bend, 200 Years of History, only briefly mentioning the Wolastoqiyik people who lived there, and afterwards proceeding as if they disappeared. I checked the census records, they're still there, but I have no idea how any of them felt about the flooding or the prospect of some structures being saved. Like all of the houses that weren't chosen to be moved either by their owners or the government of New Brunswick, that were just destroyed. And you might say, well, they couldn't save everything. Not everything is even worth being saved. And I would say, well, of course they couldn't. But isn't it? How do we decide what's worth being saved, and who gets to decide? Who gets to choose what gets archived, what gets preserved, and what gets displayed in museums? This video was about my fun afternoon at King's Landing, but it was also about the inherent biases and the value judgments that are made during historical preservation. My favorite historical artifacts are the ones that were accidentally preserved. The tin of Roman-era face cream, the complaint tablet, the Langberg bra. No one made a choice to keep those until they were rediscovered. They were lost, forgotten, or just thrown away because no one then saw the value in them. But today, they can help tell a more complete story of the past. The St. John River Valley is underwater. The Pockiok Falls are gone, and Bear Island is subsumed. In their place is a lake, a hydroelectric dam, a new town, and a historical reenactment village that is the only one telling the story. I'm not here to be the one to make the value judgments of what should be saved, what should be preserved, and what should be razed to the ground. Who am I? But quite often, the people that are responsible for those choices are unaware of their own biases, which results in gaps in the record. And of course, when it comes to historical preservation, not everything can be saved. But perhaps we can do better. We can do our best to remain conscious of our biases and maybe include a few more people at the conference table. If I get the chance, I probably will go back to King's Landing, and I probably will enjoy myself immensely. But I will also have a more complete picture of its history. Not a fully complete picture, obviously, but one that tells a more broad story, a more human story, instead of a manufactured vision of a past that never was. And I think I'll appreciate King's Landing even more next time because of it. Thanks for watching.